Hello, everyone. We are approaching Parshat Emor, which will take place this Shabbos, May 9th. And I wanted to look at a message that I think is somewhat implicit, to be found deep inside the opening Rashi and a Gemara that I studied with my Gemara class this week about the ways in which the adults in the room, have to be taking care of other folks who might still be a little too young in their thinking, perhaps not as mature as they need to be in their thinking. So it really emerges from the opening part, Rashi, on the words of the Torah which read, as the parsha begins, Vayomer Adonai Moshe Emor El Kohanim Bnei Aaron Be'amarta Lehem Lenefesh Lo Yitama Be'amav. God said to Moshe, instructs him, say to the Kohanim, the children of Aaron, and say to them, to a dead body, you should not allow yourself to become tamei. And usually we have the bear ve'amarta, speak to them and say, meaning here's the quote, but here we have the strange structure. It appears once or twice elsewhere in the Torah. Emor and ve'amarta, say and say. And says the Midrash that has to do with the ongoing roles that we have in saying to one another, and specifically about the Kohanim and the Bnei Aaron, the adults and the children. All right, the Kohanim and the Bnei. That seems to be how this drasha works. The Hazhir Gedolim al Haktanim, Rashi quotes the Gemara Yevamot, comes to tell us that the Gedolim, the adults, have to play the role of warning the children, or to warn the adults regarding the children. And that means that the children might not be careful in the rules of Tum and Ta'ara, and it's the adult's responsibility to be careful with them. In the end, it's actually very specific. The adults are not allowed to actually bring them into a situation themselves. The adults shouldn't put them in a context in which they become tamei. You might not have to do other things, but that's how it's to be read. That's how Ramban chooses to read this text, and indeed seems to be what the Gemara is saying. Hold that Rashi and Gemara, and listen to the other Gemara which we have been studying we were studying in Masechet Megillah in our Gemara class. It kind of appears out of nowhere, and we're not going to discuss why it appears there, but this is the teaching of Shimon ben Elazar. He said, Im yamru lacha zakenim stor, if the elders tell you, knock it down, break it down. Biladim, and the youngsters say, B'nai, they say, build. So who should you listen to? And his instruction is, store. You should be knocking down. Why? Va'altivne, and don't build right now. B'pnei shestirat zakenim binyan, ubinyan ne'arim stira. Because the knocking down, you might even call it destruction, but knocking down of the elders, that is actually building, and the building of the youngsters, that is knocking down. Now, many different ways in which we might want to try to unpack this teaching. In the moment, as I was reading it, I couldn't help but think about the complicated time we're finding ourselves, as many countries are finding themselves, and certainly in this country, when governors have to make decisions about lockdowns and shutdowns, which are called sator, and or on the other hand, b'nai, which is to build up, which I'll call in this case reopen. And it's absolutely the case that we know that not every area is the same. Some areas are hot spots, some areas are relatively quiet and safe, and needs to be, at some point there has to be discussion of, as there are, areas that will begin to do binyan, will begin to build, while others should remain closed. And it's those decisions, and seemingly some governors who are, and it's complicated, and there are a lot of different layers, and we know all the factors that are there, but some of them seem to be rushing for binyan, and tragically, as some apparently new models have emerged this week about possible numbers of people endangered and what they imagine to be fatalities, those who will ultimately perish because of the virus in the coming weeks and months, God forbid, Rahman al-Islam, that those numbers increased, partially because, it seems, because some places are prematurely opening up too soon and perhaps too widely without smart and careful consideration about how all those things are done. And I'm not here to point fingers at anybody, and nor am I really able to do so. But firstly, to express appreciation to our governor here, who's obviously we are still remain a central area of this virus, where wisdom seems to be carrying the day. The Zakanim are the ones who are helping give direction, and when they say Torah and they say keep it shut down, we have to believe that it's binyan, that ultimately it's about building. However much we wish that we could just rush and just finally be able to open, to embrace one another, to have semi-normal lives, be able to pray together, have a kiddush together. We have no idea what any of that still can look like. And it's frustrating and it's complicated and there's still tragedy around us. But at least we should carry with us this wisdom that firstly, lahazhir hagadolim al katanim, that the gadolim, the adults, have to be there to look after the ones who are katanim, who are youngsters, who are perhaps not making the wise decisions, the ones who are running around either disregarding any care in their personal behavior, or the ones screaming and hollering b'nai b'nai, without really being mindful enough of all the factors that must be taken into account before we do so. Because ultimately, what we're looking to do is to avoid tumat mate, is to avoid being in contact with the dead. If I bring it back to the first part of the parsha that way, and that's a hard thing. And I wish I could be with you, and you wish you could be with me. It's wonderful to take walks around the neighborhood, especially on Shabbos. This Shabbos can be frigid for May. But to be able to see your faces, or at least the top part of your faces underneath masks, if you're wearing masks, and we just wish we could go to stage 2, phase 2, 3, 4, and be back to normal. We got to do it careful with the azhara, with the careful, planned out warning of azhara, and recognize that Zakanim need to be always helping us, guide us, to be able to make wise decisions for the sake and the well-being of us all. I can't wait for that opportunity. Maybe if I'll be wearing winter coat, we take a walk this Shabbos, we'll be able to see each other and continue to think of each other and reach out to each other until that day when binyan is fully appreciated once more. Have a Shabbat Shalom.